is the first video of mobility, and this is on the track.
On the right track.
Yeah. So I'm Carter, and this is John.
Hello.
We're both PT students. We go from Fort Worth to Dallas every day, and we'd just like to share a little bit about what we learned, because we believe, movement and the power of our profession can change the world. So we're trying to provide our knowledge for free for y'all. You have anything?
Yeah, so we wanted to start this as kind of like a little passion project, kind of practice our concepts that we're learning throughout PT school. The content that we come up with is what we think will help our audience kind of improve their daily life a little bit at a time. So the first topic we wanted to talk about was mobility, because a lot of the times, when you're going throughout your day, usually you're stuck in these chronic positions, like sitting for long periods of time, like either at your desk, driving all the time, whatever it may be. Your body gets put into these positions, and the longer these positions are held, the more likely you are to develop chronic problems. So we wanted to address mobility as a way to combat that kind of chronic posture.
And so for those of y'all who are watching this on whatever platform, like we're on the train, so if we were studying or something, like we would be kind of curled up, and if you could imagine like a C shape of the spine, kind of like a banana. I think that's kind of a common posture for many Americans, is forward head and rounded forward shoulders. And simple physical therapy exercises like rowing would kind of correct that posture and increase your strength of your upper back muscles, and that can kind of prevent some of the challenges that can come with posture. But this will focus first on mobility and why it's important. And so mobility can kind of help you move through a pathological spine posture to a more healthier posture. So mobility can increase your function. So if you're trying to reach for something overhead, but you don't have the mobility in your spine to do that, you might not have the same level of function and quality of life as you otherwise would have. And if you're immobile, it can cause pain because of pinch nerves, and when your spine moves and glides like it should, there's nothing that's going to get impinged, so you'll have reduced risk of pain and reduced risk of injury, and your posture will be better. So that's kind of the first thing. You have anything about that?
Yeah, you talked about increasing function. So like one of the things we talk about in PT school is scapulohumeral rhythm. Basically, that's just how your shoulder blade moves in conjunction with your shoulder joint. So when you're seated for long periods of time, the more likely you are to develop something called kyphosis, which is increased thoracic flexion. So like if you see me right now, my shoulders are a little more forward and rounded, my head is forward, and you can see my thoracic spine is very rounded. So when I try to raise my arm, my flexion of my shoulder joint is limited. But if I work on the mobility of my shoulder joint, my scapulohumeral rhythm, my arm can actually flex even further than it could if I had kyphosis.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit more about the strength of your upper back muscles and your rotator cuff and the force couple mechanism that we'll get into in a later podcast. But so, like, what are some simple things that we can do to increase our mobility, like even on the train, like chin tucks, which is basically where you bring your chin backwards and give yourself a double chin. You're working on extensors of your head, basically, and that can reduce kind of the contracted position of the forward shoulder, the kyphosis posture of the rounded upper back, and then just bringing your shoulder blades back together, kind of giving yourself a big chest, like if you can imagine, but making a shelf with your pecs, and then tucking your chin back. that should reduce pain for a lot of people, and even desk workers who don't really have time to dedicate themselves to a resistance training program. You just do chin tucks, hold them 2-3 seconds each, do like 10 to 20 reps just while they're sitting in their chair. That could increase the amount of movement they do every day pretty easily. And I like to microdose flexibility as well. So like when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm a runner, so I have pretty tight calves. I can create some pain with like plantar fasciitis and other resulting symptoms from that tight muscle. So when I brush my teeth for 2 minutes, I'll do 4 sets of 30 seconds pretty much on one calf that's tight, and that's just found time that you can improve your pain, improve your function, improve your longevity if you're an athlete. So
yeah, you don't have to like dedicate like whole entire sessions to stretching. Like you said, you just have to find ways to streamline your daily routine and then add it into that. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Right. Yeah, that's important. I think many people could get benefit from just like standing at their desks, like microdosing, if you're standing at your desk, that'd be a macrodose of flexibility. And I actually kneel at my desk, and that's something that has allowed me to not have hip flexor pain as a runner, which is really kind of incredible because I can be a weightlifter and I can run 6 days a week and I'll have no pain because I'm macrodosing that hip flexor stretch, and I'm not really getting any symptoms from chronic overuse.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's also, I think, one important thing to talk about is usually we are on a train, so we are going to have a little bit of background noise, but I think that's part of the ambiance of this podcast. On the right track. Talking about how you can incorporate these important concepts into your daily life. We have a long commute, so I think it's important that you make the most out of the time that make the most out of these experiences. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was different cross syndrome. So you have something called upper cross syndrome. We talked a little bit about it, but so kyphosis, rounded shoulders, forward head posture. Usually it's the result of tightened muscles on one side and then lengthened muscles on the other.
Lengthened and weak.
Mm-hmm. Lengthened and weak, short and strong, or short and contracted. And it's in like almost an X pattern. So like if your chest is tight, so is the back of your neck up here, or the back of your cervical spine, and then the anterior neck. Yeah, your anterior neck. The reason why you do chin tucks is long and weak, so you want to strengthen that. You want to lengthen your chest. You want to lengthen your upper trap, your levator, your scalene muscles here. And then you also want to think about strengthening your lower trap muscles, because if these are weak, then back here is probably weak as well. So when you're stretching, if you're stretching, let's say you're doing a chest stretch, you're stretching your pec minor. I'm clasping my hands behind my back and I'm trying to push my shoulders back. I'm not trying to arch my back, I'm trying to bring my shoulders back. At the same time, I'm thinking about bringing my chin back, and I'm also thinking about bringing my shoulder blades back and down. Because one, that's stretching my pec minor right here. Really, it's like one of the most commonly chronically tight muscles in forward head posture. So if I'm stretching my pec minor, I want to simultaneously think about strengthening those weak muscles, my neck muscles and my lower thoracic muscles.
Yeah, you get a lot of bang for your buck with those kind of exercises, and I think not everyone's the same person, so you'll have to kind of look at this yourself and do some research on your own. But that's a pretty common posture exercise that many people find that relieves their pain if you have neck pain, or if you're at a desk all day and you stay in a kind of that banana-shaped kyphotic posture. It can create long-term issues, so it can be preventative for a lot of people, and it only takes 15-30 seconds every hour, or just standing up and getting a little bit of movement variety. So like when I'm working and studying 8 hours a day in my desk, like I take breaks, right? So I think it's healthy to take breaks, and one of the things I like to do is like a 10-15 minute yoga session, right? Because that's kind of recharging the mind. It's a way that I can kind of shut off from focusing intensely on cognitive tasks and detach a little bit and focus
practicing
on
mindfulness a little bit.
Right. I can focus on my physical well-being. And so we'll eventually have some protocols for stretching that you can try out, but essentially a lot of the big stretches. So the one that John just described would be great for desk workers, or you could do a straight leg raise on your back with a belt around your midfoot. That would be great for hamstrings, and really cobra stretches, downward dogs, anything that you find relief, like a yoga pose, or some of those gentle exercises can provide a lot of relief, and then you'll return to work feeling kind of refreshed and ready to attack the task.
I think another common issue that comes up with prolonged sitting that should be addressed is your hips. So if you're chronically sitting, you're in that flexed position at your hip. So that means your hip flexors are going to be tight. Your abdominals are going to be weak because they're above your hip flexors. Your glutes are probably going to be weak because if you think about that cross pattern, abs, glutes, which means if your hip flexors are short and contracted, that probably means your lower back is tight and contracted.
That's probably a lot of why people have pain in their lower back, is because those deep back muscles are just constantly on, because they're not getting support from their trunk stabilizers anteriorly with their abdominals, and they have to compensate with their back muscles. And so that's why a lot of people have strains in their back. And
so one thing I like to do whenever we're in class and I start to feel like a little stiff, I'll think about contracting my abs like I'm wearing a corset almost, squeezing my abs, and then not bending at the upper spine, but bending at the lower spine, trying to stretch out those lower back muscles. They're called erector spinae. Trying to stretch those out. I'll do that for maybe 10 to 15 seconds at a time, really focusing on my breathing, keeping my core tight, and then just coming back up. It's simple things like that can make a huge difference in your posture.
Right? Yeah, I think this is a lot of what we're saying can be done in miniature bites, right? And so this is, if you think about it more of like a lifestyle and less like a 10-minute protocol that will cure you of all your ailments, this is just kind of, you have to attack it as a long-term goal of having healthy body and healthy joints and reducing your pain.
Something is better than nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kind of mentality.
And so if you can add, one stretch one day, another stretch another day, just keep adding on to that protocol until you have 3 to 6 stretches that give you relief. That's really the goal. And doing nothing and kind of, I guess, getting into a locked state of posture where you're not introducing variety in your joints will only cause you pain as you get older and more fragile.
Yeah, and then if you're making the most out of that time, the less you're gonna have to work on it in your off time. So the less you have to dedicate, 30 minutes to an hour of stretching every day. If you're trying to be more aware of your body position while you're in those chronic positions, then the less you have to work on it later.
Right. If you think about it, you really don't have that many minutes to dedicate to flexibility in a day. Like, most people spend 8 hours sitting, and if you're trying to correct that with 30 seconds of stretching, that's not like really doing a great job at preventing pain. Like, preventing the cause of poor posture, so like self-correcting of like, well, I shouldn't be bent this far forward. I'm putting a lot of stress on my vertebra. Saying like, well, I should have a stacked posture. That's going to prevent the issues and the tightness that will occur and that will have to be corrected later. So preventing that forward head posture and standing up nice and tall with, your feet under your knees and that kind of nice plumb line posture that we talk about so much. I think that can go a long way preventing the need of stretching.
Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, in those professions where you're sitting for 8 hours a day, even if you did incorporate some type of 30-minute stretch routine at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, if you're stuck in those positions for 8 whole hours, how much is that 30 minutes actually affecting your chronic posture? Like, if you microdose it throughout the day, instead of spending 8 whole hours in those positions and trying to make a more conscious effort to change those positions, I think that's way more beneficial than just having one 30-minute stretch session a day.
And that conscious effort that you were talking about, it's not going to be continuous.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, you have to think about posture the first 30, 40 times you do it, but then after that it becomes less of a cognitive effort and more nature. So, like, I don't think about my quality posture, just kind of something that I have to remind myself of every now and then, but the default state is a great posture.
Yeah. And then, like, the more you practice it, the more it becomes, like, the first week is probably going to be the hardest week. You might even start feeling some, like, achiness or, like, some joint pain just because you're trying to change things, but that's because you're doing something new. And after that first week or so, it might actually end up getting easier.
Right, yeah. So this is something that gets easier with time as you gain more knowledge and more experience with adding in these lifestyle factors. And I think that's all we have for our mobility podcast. Did you have any last?
I think we hit all the talking points we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, we'll tune in next time. We'll see y'all on the next train. Peace.